I'm really happy to be here and I appreciate it. So I was asked to talk a little bit about our water reuse regulations here in Colorado, which is good because that's exactly what I work on. So what is water reuse? Well, really it's a broad term to talk about reusing water more than once for beneficial purposes. So beneficial purposes include things like non-potable purposes, so agricultural irrigation, landscape irrigation, cooling towers, toilet flushing, you name it, any non-potable purpose you can think of. But we can also reuse water for potable purposes. So water reuse involves different water sources. And depending on the water source that you have, that you start with, and what you want to use it for, we have what we call fit-for-purpose treatment and reuse. So you want to take the water that you have, remove the pathogens and contaminants to protect public health and the environment for whatever you're using it for. So when we talk about recycled or reclaimed water, we're talking about black water reuse, domestic wastewater reuse. When we talk about gray water, we're talking about water that doesn't have as many organic contaminants. So we're just talking about water from showers, bathroom sinks, laundry machines, and laundry sinks. When we talk about storm water, we're talking about runoff from a storm event. So you're going to be looking at some nasty chemicals from that runoff. When we talk about rainwater, we're looking at roof runoff. So you're going to have some feces from some birds and some squirrels and that type of pathogen to look at. We also have condensate that you can reuse from condensation. And then we also have produce water that you can reuse. Produce water is the water that comes out of the well after oil and gas fracking. So all these different purposes, all these different waters can be used for different potable and non-potable purposes. So here in Colorado we have 3 water reuse regulations. Reg 84 is reclaimed water control. That's for our black water, our domestic wastewater. We have a gray water regulation, and we also have a direct potable reuse rule embedded in our primary drinking water regulations. I'm going to talk about each of these. So Regulation 84 is specifically for non-potable reuse. Here in Colorado, we reuse about 5 to 6 billion gallons of reclaimed water annually. That's a lot. Most of our users are for landscape irrigation. We have approximately 570 user sites in the state. We also have a lot of industrial reuse, though. A couple of our big power plants on the Front Range use a lot of reclaimed water for cooling. We have 30 treatment facilities that treat reclaimed water, and we have 20 different ways you can reuse reclaimed water. You can reuse it for community garden irrigation, commercial agriculture, commercial laundries, car washes, firefighting, all kinds of different things. But again, our main uses are landscape and industrial. And we have 3 categories of reclaimed water in Colorado, and those are based on water quality standards that have to be met before you reuse the water. And these are based on E. coli concentrations and either total suspended solids or turbidity. We also have 2 types of reclaimed water treatment facilities. Centralized systems are your typical municipal collection system that treats the wastewater and redistributes it out through underground purple pipes. But we have localized systems. A localized system could be a system located here in this hotel. So it could collect our wastewater from our showering and everything, treat it and recirculate it for something like toilet flushing or irrigating the outside. Localized systems could also entail a golf course where you only have domestic wastewater collection from the homes surrounding that golf course. So localized systems have less industrial and commercial dilution, so they have higher pathogen concentrations, and therefore they have a little bit of different treatment scheme in our regulation. We also have gray water control regulation 86. Again, this is non-potable reuse. We have 4 classes of gray water, 2 different uses. So single family homes can reuse gray water as well as non-single family homes. So any kind of property can reuse gray water. And the 2 main uses are subsurface landscape irrigation and toilet flushing. One of the differences between Reg 86 and 84 is that instead of meeting water quality standards in this regulation, you meet a design criteria. An engineer designed this regulation, by the way. So the National Sanitation Foundation has a testing protocol where they test these gray water systems and ensure that the water that comes out is going to be safe and consistent. And so in our regulation, you have to meet that standard in order to use gray water for toilet flushing. Another difference is these gray water systems have to be locally enforced. So local governments have to adopt an ordinance for gray water. So the state, while we have the regulation and you have to follow that, states really have to administer their gray water programs. So as of now, I think we have 5 gray water ordinances. Molly might actually know of a couple more than I do, but that's kind of where we're at with gray water. So then we have our direct potable reuse rule. This was recently went effective in January of this year, and we're very proud. We're the first state in the nation to have a direct potable reuse regulation. But potable reuse is treating wastewater for drinking, bathing, and cooking. The water has to meet all the federal regulations and maximum contaminant levels as drinking water. And we use advanced treatment techniques to purify the water to make it safe for drinking purposes. So in our rule, we have a lot of components. You have to apply to do a direct potable reuse system. The CDPHE, we're going to take a look at that application, and if we don't think you have the financial or resources at all to maintain and operate a direct potable reuse program and produce safe water, we're not going to allow that system to operate. We require that you do communications and outreach with your community prior to serving them direct potable reuse water. That's because if you don't do that, your public could be very resistant to direct potable reuse and could create issues with implementation, potentially harming and completely demolishing your project. We have an enhanced source control component. That's similar to, well, it pretty much is EPA's pre-treatment program, but we also have some additional requirements with public health protection in mind. There's operations controls, and then we have the wastewater treatment control. This is making sure that the wastewater treatment process is delivering a consistent water quality to your advanced direct potable reuse treatment trains. I like to think of it as baking cookies. You have to get the ingredients just right for them to come out correctly. And lastly, I want to talk about the multiple barrier treatment system. This is basically kind of a built-in redundancy of advanced treatment. So there's going to be 3 different barriers for pathogens, to remove pathogens, and there's going to be 3 different barriers for chemicals as well. And so in this process, if one of your barriers doesn't work and your sensor says, hey, you didn't remove XYZ, that water isn't going to keep going through the process. It's going to get sent back to the beginning to get treated or discharged. So these are very protective ways to make sure that the water at the end of this treatment train is going to be safe for consumption for us. So is direct potable reuse safe? Yes, absolutely. The technology to treat any water to any level that we want to consume or use safely has been there, albeit it could be too expensive, but here we are in a day where we can definitely treat wastewater to drinking water standards safely. We can operate it in such a way and manage it to do it safely. We are a culture of health. We're the health department. We wouldn't create a direct potable reuse rule if we didn't believe it could be done safely. And we're going to be making sure that any utility that implements DPR is doing it according to our regulations and is following our rules. So one of the biggest hindrances to direct potable reuse is public perception. So the term toilet to tap was coined back in the 90s and really set the state of California back decades in terms of implementing potable reuse. It's critical to educate your public about reuse prior to implementing, like I said. One of the things that works really well are demonstration projects. So you're looking at a little trailer that it belongs to Colorado. We have our own little direct potable reuse treatment trailer. There's treatment components that live in there, and this thing can be trucked around anywhere and be used to demonstrate how direct potable reuse can be done safely. And when people come through this tour and they learn about it, they typically go from naysayer to feeling a little bit more comfortable about direct potable reuse. So this is one of the best ways to help the public understand what's going on, be transparent, and get folks on board with it. Another one is messaging. One of the best messages out there is to talk about the fact that we've been doing potable water reuse since the beginning of wastewater and drinking water treatment. You have a wastewater treatment plant upstream of a drinking water treatment plant. You're taking that water right out of the river as wastewater and treating it, of course, and serving it for drinking. And when you explain that to folks, it really makes a lot of sense. People also like the term purified water or advanced treated wastewater. So there are a lot of different ways that you can go about getting the public to understand direct potable reuse and feeling more comfortable with it. So in terms of the future of reuse in Colorado, we do have some impediments. Like Peter mentioned, we have the water rights issue. We also, with non-potable reuse, the fact that you have to have dual plumbing within the premise, as well as if you're a centralized system, you have to have underground purple pipe that's separate. That can be a hindrance. Resources and regulatory implementation. Some municipalities just don't have the resources to implement the regs the way they're written. You're looking at one of 2 employees at the Water Quality Control Division that focus on reclaimed water, so we also are a little short there. And with direct potable reuse, we're not sure what the public's going to think here in Colorado. When we developed our rule, we had plenty of stakeholders involved in our process. They were all, you know, engineers that understood direct potable reuse. So we'll see. We hope that it's successful. But we have a lot of opportunities for reuse here. I mean, our regulations have a lot of options. In terms of getting around the water rights thing, there are water sharing agreements where if one municipality has reusable water rights, perhaps they can do some sort of contractual agreement and share with another municipality who does not, work something out that way. Colorado is still growing, obviously, so people can plan for potable reuse. They can plan for non-potable reuse, dual plumb the houses, dual plumb their underground systems if they'd like. And with direct potable, I think just having that regulation in place is going to help water suppliers plan for the future further ahead. You know, now that they know there's a safe way to do it, and we'll be regulating it. I think we'll start to see that in people's integrated management plans. We think someone needs to go first. So that's all I have. Thank you so much for your time.